Good afternoon. I am meteorologist Mike Linden back again for another update on all things Hurricane Delta. Now, according to the National Hurricane Center, a major Category 3 hurricane with max wind speeds at 115 miles per hour. Again, good evening. I am meteorologist Mike Linden. If you are watching on YouTube, I ask that you please subscribe to the channel. It's right there underneath the video. Subscribe to the channel and click on that notification bell. That way you always know whenever we drop a new video, whenever we go live, or really whenever we have anything exciting coming to the channel, which is often. We have really ramped things up over about the past year and a half or so, and more is on the way. Of course, right underneath me as well, you'll be able to see our social media handles too. We are not only on YouTube, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well. Be sure to interact with us there. And of course, if you do choose to interact with us there, even during this live stream right now, we've got the chat I'm paying attention to. I've got it right up next to me here on a tablet. So if you guys ask me any questions, I should be able to answer them over the course of the live stream, and then we'll take some time at the end where I'll go over the questions again just to be sure that I covered everything. That way everyone gets to ask a question if they would so choose. Now, before we jump into the graphics that I have prepared here, that is, of course, that is Hurricane Delta that is stewing in the Gulf of Mexico right now as a Category 3 hurricane. Now, earlier this morning when Chief Digital Meteorologist Leslie Hudson was doing her live stream at around 11 o'clock this morning, she was talking about how for folks that live along the eastern coastline of Texas that that they're probably thinking, oh my gosh, it's right there. When is it going to turn? Well, turn has kind of begun, at least a little bit at this point here. It will really continue to lock in overnight tonight as we head into tomorrow. And to see the path from the National Hurricane Center, we can do that on the My Radar app. All you have to do is turn on the hurricane tracker layer, and that will enable you to be able to see the path. We've got it pulled up here on the iPad. I should say as well, please let us know where you are watching from in the chat. I've got it up for all of our platforms, Facebook, YouTube. I think we're live everywhere. Ask me a question and say what's up to Matt. Matt is behind the scenes there, kind of driving the boat, if you will. So Matt, if you would please turn on the winds layer and the hurricane tracker layer. That way we can take a look at where Delta is expected to go. Of course, this is only the second season ever since we have gone into the Greek alphabet, the first year being 2005 and the second 2020, this present year. What a year it has been, right? Well, there you go. We've turned on the hurricane tracker layer. We've turned on the winds layer, which you can see the winds aloft, higher in the atmosphere, upstairs, as some folks would say, showing you those winds higher in the atmosphere, more steering current wise. You can do that in the winds layer. Matt, if you want to pull that up there on the layers layer menu there, hit winds. You have it on, of course, but you have the option for surface winds and jet streams at 500 millibars. You can change the colors, really cool stuff. Let's put it on the, let's bring up the jet stream for a second here, Matt. And this is going to show you essentially those winds that are upstairs. There is the jet stream. Thank you for doing that, Matt. Appreciate it. Look at that. Ooh, that is a strong jet there sitting over the eastern coast of the United States. And you can see it all across the world. One of my favorite parts about this app, of course, is the fact that there's so much that you can do with it, so many customizable layers, wild stuff. But yeah, let's zoom back in, Matt, to Delta and throw the surface winds on there. Thank you very much. We've got the radar layer turned on here. You can see that over the course of Delta's journey, just barely touching the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico and making landfall as a Category 2 hurricane. Just prior to that, it was a Category 4. Matt, if you can drag it over to the start, I guess, of Delta, of its life here, and watch it, just the rapid intensification that this storm possessed, right? So kind of stewed around to the south of Cuba as a depression, and then very quickly jumped to a Category 1, 2, 3, and eventually 4 hurricane, Cat 4 hurricane, very quickly over the course of just a couple of days, making landfall as a Category 2 in the Yucatan Peninsula, and now it sits just to the east of Mexico and the eastern border of Texas. The path from the National Hurricane Center, though, taking it very close to the path of Hurricane Laura. If you remember from earlier this season, a major hurricane, a Category 4 hurricane at landfall. Matt, if you can zoom back into the path there, we're on current hurricanes. We're good to go. We don't need to bring up Laura, but the key here and the biggest change from the previous update from the NHC at 1 o'clock, if you can zoom a little to the north there, Matt, is that the storm is expected to make landfall as a Category 3 hurricane and maintain a little bit of that strength and remain Hurricane 1, Category 1, all the way and into portions of Louisiana. Of course, the real key here is going to be the storm surge and the rain that is going to come from this event. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But again, a Category 3 hurricane, and look at the time there, 6 p.m. from the NHC. So the landfall time of Delta has really kind of been all over the place. It has shifted wildly in the past couple of days, from 11 o'clock in the evening a couple of days ago to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That was overnight into today, I believe. Days are getting all mixed together, but around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And now notice, pushing that back even more. Delta has truly been, I mean, if it's driving stick shift, it is all over the place. It is in first, second, third, fourth gear. It's going to get going here eventually. The issue here is that it has undergone what's called eye wall replacement, where essentially the eye wall wraps around itself and kind of destroys, gets rid of the eye wall in the center of the hurricane and replaces it. What that does is cause it to kind of get a little bit larger in that moment. And that kind of will weaken at least those max winds just a little bit, because these hurricanes, they really want to be coiled nice and tight. Think about when you spin a top, right? Sometimes when you spin it, it just kind of wobbles and it stinks, right? It loses its momentum. But then you get that spin. If you recall the movie Inception, shout out to Christopher Nolan, right at the end of the movie, when Leo spins the top, right? And it's just going, and you get that good spin. You know what I'm saying? That is what these hurricanes want to mimic, really, on a much, much, much larger scale, essentially. When this eye wall replacement process is when a hurricane undergoes eye wall replacement, it kind of does that wobble a little bit because it's losing its kind of center. These things, like a buzzsaw, right? They really want to stay consistent and tightly coiled. Think about when you flex your muscles, right? If you were to try to lift weights really without flexing, it might be difficult. You got to engage all of your muscles, and that's what these hurricanes are trying to do by staying nice and tight, not kind of losing that a little bit. Even though you'd think it getting larger, it'd be getting worse off. That might not be the right terms there, but either way, Delta's landfall time has changed a bunch and is now likely to occur at some time later tomorrow afternoon, potentially into the evening hours. For that record, the team will be with you through landfall. Myself, Chief Digital Meteorologist Leslie Hudson, as well as meteorologist Stephanie Lauber. We've got the team behind the scenes. Big shout out to the video guys, Damian, Matt, and Fern. Everyone will be in this weekend, and we will have you covered across all platforms. But now, Matt, let's jump right in to the graphics here, and we will take a look at where we expect Delta to go from here, because that's the million-dollar question, right? And, of course, its short-term future is landfall with the United States. So I've got the chat here up right next to me here. So if anybody has any questions, be sure to get them in the chat, and I will be sure to answer them. Let's jump right in. All right, so we've got the tropical infrared imagery, which of course, satellite imagery, right? It's from space, and we're looking kind of right down, a bird's eye view of Delta. Now, with Delta, let me jump back here, and I'm going to zoom in. You can see that its eye is not as super well defined, having undergone that kind of wobble a little bit. It'll begin to get going a little bit here, but it's not too big of a storm. That's certainly something to keep in mind as well. So that's why likely the NHC bumping that up a little bit into that Category 3 status, that once it gets settled a bit, it should be able to keep that Cat 3 intensity as it works its way toward the coastline. But I want you to look at this here on the water vapor imagery. That is the incorrect water vapor. Hang on one second. Let me grab it for everybody. It is right up here. But the water vapor imagery, this is going to show us essentially where we are seeing the drier air. This is important because that drier air, as well as shear, is going to weaken this hurricane potentially a little bit at landfall, at least prevent it from potentially getting stronger. So the drier air is right here. I mean, you can see this kind of dry-ish looking color, this brown beige from Oklahoma City all the way into Texas. So that's going to not only work its way into the upper level of the storm, and that could help to weaken it. Of course, these hurricanes, they want warm, wet air, not dry air. That's one. Two, when it comes to shear, you've got these winds coming in from the west, but from the southwest here, while this hurricane is moving toward the northeast. So you got opposites working against one another here, and that's how you're going to get the shear, where if we have winds going in, let's just say the north direction, if you have winds coming in anything but north, we now all of a sudden have shear. That could work to chop this up a little bit here. But it's the warm Gulf of Mexico waters that are really, really fueling this thing. And we will get to the sea surface temperatures in just a moment. Let's take one more look here at the tropical tracker. 345 miles off the coastline, at least right now. Earlier this afternoon, it was 370. So it's moving somewhat slowly, but it is, again, it's been all over the place in terms of the landfall here. And here you can see just sitting off the coastline of southwestern Louisiana at 2 p.m., 120 miles per hour as a Category 3 storm. Galveston, you are not in the cone, but you should still almost kind of act if you are. That's really kind of the best way to go about these kind of events, that if you fail to prepare, if you prepare to fail, then you better fail. I screwed this up. I did it earlier today. If you fail to prepare, and whatever. Either way, you thank yourself that you're doing it. You thank yourself that you're doing it in the long run. Better to be safe than sorry, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Jeez, in so many words. Here's the tropical tracker, though, when we zoom it out, and you can see that Delta does maintain Hurricane 1 status all the way into central Louisiana, taking a somewhat different path than Laura, but not too far off here. And the folks in Lake Charles, they just need a break. The folks in Louisiana have really just need a break. It's pretty much been all them when it comes to landfall in the United States, or at least the Gulf Coast of the United States, I should say. Tennessee, Kentucky, you're very likely to see some heavy rain as we work our way through the weekend hours and all the way into Sunday afternoon, pushing into central Tennessee and western Kentucky. Let's take a look now at the watches and warnings, which earlier today there was a hurricane warning in place for almost the entire southern coastline of Louisiana here. And that still remains to be the case, but that has now shifted a little bit to the west. So it includes the western portion of Morgan City all the way westward to Port Arthur, kind of stopping just to the east of Galveston. Galveston, Texas, I should add, this purple color here. Hold on, let me grab my pointer. Stand by. There we go. So this purple color here that extends through Galveston, that is a tropical storm warning. But again, better to assume as if you are under a hurricane warning in situations like this. We're not talking about that much a distance, and don't get caught up in it being, oh, I'm just here over the line. I'm right here. I'm good. It's not a hurricane warning. That's foolish. Do not have that mindset. Let me zoom back out here so you can get a better look at things. Again, southern Louisiana, that red color all the way through to Morgan City, you are under a hurricane warning. The purple color, a tropical storm warning that does include the city of New Orleans, and then a tropical storm watch just to the east of New Orleans, south of I-10 there. Let's take a look now at the storm surge warning, and this will really be the key with Delta. Of course, we've talked many times before about where you're going to find the strongest winds and the most inundation of storm surge. And that is when you break a hurricane into quadrants, right? There's 4 quadrants. Where would you think the strongest winds and the greatest storm surge would be? Here, let me draw it on the map. So if we have our circle here, let's just say that this is our hurricane. If we were to split it into 4, if you guys want to tell me in the chat, I'll write numbers on it even for you. That's terrible. 3 and 4. Let me know in the chat right now, 1, 2, 3, or 4, which quadrant of a hurricane are we likely to find the strongest winds as well as the most inundation of storm surge? Well, we'll give it here just a moment, and then I will let you know. We're starting to get some answers here. So put your answers in the chat, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Which quadrant of a hurricane are we going to find the strongest winds and the most likely area of the highest inundation of storm surge? Okay, we're getting a lot of answers here. Getting a lot of answers here in the chat. The answer is number 2 for those of you that said number 2. That is the right front quadrant, right? RF instead of the number 2. That is because a hurricane rotates counterclockwise, right? And with all this water from the Gulf of Mexico literally rushing and following the direction of the rotation, it's essentially right here on this drawing, at least. I know it's getting messy now, where you're going to find the strongest wind, or the most storm surge. The winds would actually be closer to the eye of the storm here. Eye of the hurricane, I should say, closer to the eye wall. But either way, it's the same deal. This is rotating counterclockwise as well. That's a mess now. But anyway, thank you guys for answering in the chat. Wow, a lot of answers. Love it. A lot of people saying number 2. You guys are learning, or at least you're really watching these chats, which is awesome. You're very knowledgeable people. Love it. So let's keep on moving here. Here's the potential inundation. And notice that if I were to put the track on top of this, I think I can do that. Let's see. Might just have to edit this really quickly. But what I can do here is I can put the track from the NHC right on top of that of the storm surge inundation. So that red color there, that is greater at or greater than 9 feet of storm surge inundation. So imagine if a human being is 6 feet tall, that's almost 2 of those people stacked on top of one another's worth of water where it's not supposed to be. Let me grab the cone here, and then we will drop this into the graphic. There you go. All right, and let me toss on the track as well. You guys are getting almost to see how the sausage is made behind the scenes a little bit here, making the graphic on the fly. Love it. All right, here we go, and boom, there is the track. So let me go ahead and shout out to Matt behind the scenes. He would be upset if I didn't save this graphic. So let's go ahead and hit save. And let's get out of here. We'll go back to the show. Stand by. All right, the graphic just has to load. There it is. Okay, so if we look at the forecasts here, the storm surge inundation is the color beneath the track. But notice where we are finding, as we just talked about, right? When you look at where the right front quadrant of that hurricane is going to be, in this case, Hurricane Delta, I'll draw it roughly here, right? And we split it into quadrants. Right here, this is the right front quadrant. Look at where we are finding. Look at where we are finding the potential highest inundation for storm surge, as well as where we're likely to find the strongest winds too. So, essentially, for those of you that, even if you live in an area that isn't in this red color, that extends all the way out into New Orleans and even into Biloxi, Mississippi, folks, greater than 1 foot of storm surge. Now, it's certainly greater as you work your way westward into the southwestern coastline of Louisiana, but from Morgan City, that's 3 feet of storm surge all the way north, or all the way inland, I should say, to New Iberia, and then pushing westward into Texas even, starting to see some storm surge almost all the way as south as Galveston. 1 foot, that's that blue color there, folks. But this is the most important part to take seriously. If I were to say, if you had to pick out of all the elements, all the things that you're going to face with a hurricane, what is the one to be paying attention to? And it's definitely the potential for storm surge, and especially where you live. Inland flooding is the #1 killer when it comes to natural disasters. It's not hurricanes, it's not lightning, it's not tornadoes, I should say. It's not lightning, it's not hail, snow, ice. It's flooding. So you really need to take that especially seriously. And for the folks that live along the coastline of Louisiana, Matt, if you want to pull up the My Radar app really quickly, we'll show a live radar. For those of you that live along the southern coastline there, southwestern coastline, I should say, time is running out, right? And I know that sounds a little intense, but it's serious. You need to be sure that you've already had that plan in place, and that's fantastic if at the beginning of hurricane season, and especially for you folks that live in and around the Louisiana coastline, it's been very active this summer. So I truly hope you have what you need, the non-perishable foods, the water for at least a week. And I talk about one of these all the time. I think they're more and more important these days, is a power bank with a USB here. You can plug in whatever is charged via USB into that, so you can keep your cell phone charged in case of an emergency. You can use the My Radar app to follow what's going on weather-wise, and again, most importantly, be able to get information from emergency management officials, or if you have to, reach out to emergency officials. But you need to be sure that you have your preps done really you're really running out of time past this evening, because by tomorrow morning, especially along the coast, it's likely to be a little messy as we head into tomorrow afternoon. So Matt, let's jump back into the weather graphics here and take a look at the sea surface temperatures. As we talked about before, when it comes to the ingredients that hurricanes and tropical storms and tropical cyclones in general, the ingredient that they most need, their lifeblood, it's warm water. And what happens to be one of the warmest areas when it comes to a body of water in and around the United States? Well, it is the Gulf of Mexico, without a doubt. Now, the Atlantic coastline is a warm ocean current, right? It flows from the south toward the north. Pacific is the opposite, at least in the northern hemisphere, when it comes to bodies of land. That's why Pacific is colder, right? So some of the warmest water to swim in the United States is along the Gulf coastline, along the western coastline of Florida. But notice there's some blues in there, right? In terms of the temperatures, right? 77, 78. Now, in order for a hurricane to maintain its intensity, it needs to stay in that low 80s range to really strengthen. And anything cooler than that is at least not ideal. So it's important to see this map, and if there is any kind of silver lining here, it's that the mega hot Gulf of Mexico isn't necessarily as mega hot as it has been year on year, might I add. So that's important to remember here. And another weather phenomena that has occurred here is something called upwelling, where, especially considering that path right there into the Gulf of Mexico and along the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf Coast line, we've seen Sally, we've seen soon-to-be Delta, we've seen Laura, all very strong, some of them major hurricanes. And these sat over the Gulf of Mexico, sucking up all that warm water at the surface of the water for a relatively long period of time, at least relatively speaking. So that churned up the water essentially in that area and brought the cooler water from lower in the water and brought it to the surface. That has cooled things down a little bit, kind of mixing things up. So that's important to remember too, especially as we look ahead to Delta and really in tropical meteorology in general. So we're going to take a look now at the ECMWF, otherwise known as the Euro model. This is a weather model that meteorologists look at pretty generally. It's one of the big ones, if you will. You got the GFS and the NAM and the HER, all these different models that you can look at to give you somewhat different outcomes. They all look at things a little differently. Some of them have different biases, but the European is one that I'm going to show you at least right now. And let's put it in motion here and compare it to the forecast from the NHC, and notice it's pretty darn close, if not a little bit to the west of at least the center of the cone there. And again, for the folks that live in Lake Charles, and really for the folks that live on the Gulf Coast, I know it's been a difficult season, but at least on the bright side of things, November 30th is the official end of the season. So we are almost there. But it could very likely be a very dangerous day tomorrow for those of you that live right along the coastline there. And again, time is running out for you to do your final preparations. Once this thing is off it's disconnected, its pipeline, if you will, from the Gulf of Mexico. It can't pull in any of that warm water, its lifeblood, and it eventually begins to weaken and dissipate. But nonetheless, as it continues to do so, you're talking about a lot of water on its way. A lot of rain will work its way inland through central Louisiana and all the way north and east into Mississippi, Kentucky, Tennessee, and into Arkansas as well. That orangey kind of color is upwards of 7 inches of rain over the next 3 days. That 5 to 7 inch polygon there, or the colors, I should say. Let me grab the pointer right here. This tongue of moisture here. That's where you're going to find the most rain. Bringing in a decent amount here into northern Mississippi, Alabama, and into the Tennessee and Ohio River valleys. So that's something to watch out for into and throughout this upcoming weekend. A very similar path to Laura. The intensity is different, might I add. The intensity is different. When we saw Laura approaching the coastline, it was growing like crazy and was super duper close to getting to Category 5. But nonetheless, even if it's a little bit off or a lot off, for folks that live along that Gulf Coast, you need to be prepared. Time is running out. Let's take a look here at the chat. Be sure that I am not missing anything. And before we answer any of your questions, so get them into the chat right now. If you have any questions for me, Matt, let's take a look at that weather stem camera from Baton Rouge, overlooking Alex Box Stadium, courtesy of our partners at WeatherStem. And right in the foreground of the camera, or of the shot there, you can see the baseball stadium for the LSU Tigers. Probably not going to be playing too much baseball, let alone because of what is going on in the world, but because of the weather that is on its way here over the next 24 to 48 hours. Kind of a blanket of clouds there sitting low in the sky, likely to remain rather dreary as we work our way into Friday as rain begins to envelop the region through Friday and into Saturday. So again, big shout out to our partners at WeatherStem for that live look there. Now let's take a look here at the questions. So we've got someone on Facebook asking, what's the impact just north of Lake Charles? And this graphic kind of shows you that just a little bit. Rain, a lot of it. The storm surge, of course, potentially upwards of 11 plus feet. I'm 6'3". That's 2 of me, essentially, worth of water where it's not supposed to be. So storm surge, especially if you live along the coastline, Lisa, and then the rain working its way through to the north of Lake Charles. If you live in, again, that area, let me pull up the tropical tracker here, this graphic, so you can see where the landfall may occur. That's where you got to worry about the strong winds, of course. So I'll leave this graphic up there. Let me ask another question here. Jeanette digging the shirt. Appreciate it. Big shout out to Helicity. Shout out to Justin. Hey, big shout out to you, Justin. Stay safe in Louisiana. Sorry, Matt's talking to me. What's your question? What do you say, Matt? Can they retire a Greek name? That's the question? Yeah, that's a great question. I believe so. But that is a great question. I guess I should know that question. Stumped me a little bit on that one. We'll find out the answer to that one. Knowledge is power, Jeffrey. All right, Greg asked the question, even with cooler water, this is on Facebook, you can ask questions wherever you want though, even with cooler water prior to landfall, will the forward speed keep it up from weakening if it stays around 12 miles per hour? So forward speed and the momentum will certainly play into things, but man, that warmer water, that's really going to be the key. And of course, there's so many other variables, Greg. You got the shear and the drier air to the northwest over Texas, and as that front continues to advance, not only will it help to kind of nudge Delta in the right direction, kind of really emphasize that turn, because notice the track is barely in Texas. But if you take a look at the storm in and of itself, I mean, gosh, you take a look at this and probably get a little worried if you lived along the eastern coastline of Texas or even Mexico, right? So that front to the north and west of it, if I pull up the water vapor imagery here, Greg, is really, really going to be super important. A lot of variables at play, but that is certainly one of them. And again, look at this this big gap here. You got all this wet air here. That is water vapor, right? And then you got this big dry slot. It doesn't like that. It likes warm water and wet air, right? This is most certainly not that. All right, so that's a great question, Greg. Thank you so much for asking it. Let's see what else we got here. I gotta get that, man. I gotta get that fail to prepare. Prepare to fail. If you fail to prepare, then prepare to fail. There it is. We got it, folks. Okay. Philip on Facebook. I should add is asking about the storm surge in Gulf Shores. Okay. So here's the deal. This isn't likely. I don't want to say that you're out of the woods here, right? In Gulf Shores. I guess from east. Let me pull up the inundation map here, the forecast, and I'll show you here. I've got to advance it just a smidge, and I should be able to zoom in on it. Stand by. But that is a great question. So notice, even to the east of Louisiana, or sorry, to the east of New Orleans, I should say, you have greater than a foot of storm surge, pushing all the way into, the panhandle of Florida. There is no storm surge, at least in the forecast, in terms of the inundation here, but it's certainly not going to be a good day at the beach. I'll throw that in there. But the coastline of Alabama, your little sliver here of the coastline, potentially upwards of a foot of storm surge. So I would certainly not plan on heading to the beach tomorrow. And if you live in coastal communities there, just understand that it's likely to be a not a fun day with, again, a foot of storm surge. That's on the low end, potentially. You could see more here, and a lot of rain. Not to mention that as that storm works its way inland, as we know about the right front quadrant, right, spinning counterclockwise, it's kind of in this general area too, where we may start to see some tornado watches tomorrow because of that counterclockwise rotation. Someone asked about that, Matt. I figured. Usually we get someone asking about tornadoes at this point, a day out from landfall. Caleb on Facebook. Shout out to Caleb. Yeah, there certainly is, especially with the potential for a storm like this, as strong as it is, and really with a cyclone this large, typically a lot larger than your normal, mid-latitude cyclones, at least in some instances. That's maybe not super accurate. Those can be gigantic with gigantic fronts. Getting ahead of myself. Either way, in terms of tornado, short answer, yes, it's certainly something to understand that it could happen. I can't tell you, I can't give you a guarantee that, yes, you will see them. It is a pretty good chance, though, especially, again, right here where those winds are going to likely be the strongest, and you're likely to get that shear interacting from the drier air moving in from the west. Okay, we got any other questions here? I think I got everything, Matt. I should add for the folks that are watching, if not aware, of course, we are on YouTube. We have a growing channel there. If you're watching on YouTube, big shout out to everybody. I know Sandy Rose, big shout out to her. She's like our #1 fan on YouTube. Big shout out to Sandy Rose. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click on that notification bell. That way you always know whenever we post a new video or whenever we're live. Come say hi. We'd love to chat. Now, one thing I'll mention before I go is that Chief Meteorologist Leslie Hudson will be back and will take you through the evening hours to give you live updates on where Delta is going next and the very latest from the National Hurricane Center. Be sure to follow us on social media so that way you know. Again, be sure to sub to us on YouTube right now and turn that bell on so that way you know exactly when Leslie's going live. You'll get a notification right to your phone. Of course, you can watch us in the My Radar app as well. And again, I hope that everybody really just understands that time is really running out, if not kind of already has, for those of you that live where that cone is. Let me pull that up. Or Matt, if you can pull up the My Radar app and throw the hurricane tracker layer on there, we'll take a look and zoom right on in to where landfall is expected for us. And again, time is running out. It is right off the coastline there, so your final preparations kind of need to be done this evening. Regardless, after your preparations are done, jump right back on social media and you can watch Chief Meteorologist Leslie Hudson's update come in this evening. And then I will be back early tomorrow morning to take you through the morning hours as Delta makes its final approach to the coastline. And then Leslie will be back in along with meteorologist Stephanie Lauber for landfall coverage as we work our way through tomorrow afternoon. Again, big shout out to everyone on the team behind the scenes. We got Matt, Fernand, Damien. Shout out to all of them behind the scenes, and shout out to all of you. I hope that you stay safe and stay dry. From all of us on the team, have a good one. We'll see you in the next one.